Hey, what is up mortals? It is TCCrew here with a new video for you. Welcome to part 8 of What If Deku Was a Viltrumite. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying sit back and relax. You're in for a treat. So begin. Well, you've brought me here. Now what? Izuku said, his voice sounding cold with a hint of impatience and annoyance. In front of him was none other than his ice-using classmate, Shoto Todoroki, and he remained silent. Izuku was even more annoyed by this as he asked, "Are you going to talk? Or did you drag me all the way here just to stare at me?" With a voice that reflected his progressively growing annoyance, the silence that followed only served to worsen Izuku's mood, as he decided that he had enough. The green-haired boy got up from the wall that he was leaning against and proceeded to walk out of the hallway. "I couldn't reach you," the bi-colored teen then said, his voice sounding as cold as always. Izuku stopped upon hearing this, before he slowly turned towards Todoroki. "Even when I did my best, even when I did everything right, I didn't even come close to beating you. You were so overwhelming that I could do nothing but compete for second place." The ice user continued, sounding like he was more heated now. Izuku looked like he was unaffected by this, as he leaned back against the wall and responded by saying, "I made you a promise, didn't I? I said that I was going to crush you, and you're contradicting yourself already. You claim that you did your best, but I don't recall seeing you using your flames at any point." With a cold voice once more, Todoroki reacted weirdly to this, as if he had hoped that it went unnoticed, as he looked away from Izuku and said, "I made a promise. I vowed to myself that I wouldn't use my father's quirk no matter what." With a voice that sounded like he was in pain, Izuku was just confused by this, as he raised an eyebrow and said, "You vow to always hold back? It's pretty bold of you to say that in front of me, out of all people. Also, you speak as if you're doing this just to spite your dad." With a voice that reflected his confusion, Todoroki turned back to Izuku upon hearing this, almost looking a little offended, as he took a breath to calm down before asking, "Tell me, have you heard of quirk marriages?" With a voice that tried to keep his cool aura, Izuku was even more intrigued now, but he was a little worried at the same time. He could feel that this conversation would not end up in a good place. Todoroki then spoke and explained everything, and the green-haired boy realized that his worry was for a good reason. The bi-colored teen told Izuku about his past, about how he was abused by his father, how his mother was driven to the brink of insanity, and how his father was obsessed with All Might. Izuku didn't know how to feel about this, as it both answered and raised questions. It answered the question of why ending up in second place with such a huge gap ahead of you was something that affected Todoroki negatively. His father had the same struggle with All Might. A question that it raised was why Todoroki felt a need to compete against him. It could be because of Omni-Man, but why? Izuku's father doesn't have a license. "Your father doesn't have a license, so he shouldn't be an obstacle, but I'm sure that you've seen the debate by now," the bi-colored teen then said, his voice back in its usual cool. Izuku followed everything that Todoroki said, knowing exactly what he was talking about. His father really shouldn't be an obstacle for him without a license, but apparently there was a debate that changed things. With that in mind, said debate could only be one thing. "Ever since your father made his debut, people have been trying to figure out where he belongs. They've been comparing him to licensed heroes in an attempt to figure out his ranking. It is still unclear of where he should be precisely, but one thing has been clear amongst everyone. Omni-Man compares to All Might in many ways." Todoroki then continued. Izuku frowned upon hearing this, for he knew what Todoroki was talking about. His father did compare to All Might, and part of him was sure that he would be the #1 hero if he had a license. He agreed with what was said, but he also didn't like where Todoroki was going with this. I was created to surpass All Might, that includes Omni when considering how he compares to him. Your strength is a good enough reason for me to defeat you, but since you're the son of the unlicensed hero, it becomes more of a duty and obligation. I will defeat you, Midoriya, and I'll do it with nothing but my ice. I refuse to use that bastard's power. I'd rather die than do so. The ice user finished, sounding ironically heated with his last declaration. Izuku could feel his annoyance rise even more upon hearing this. Todoroki didn't just tell him that he was going to defeat him. He said he was going to hold back. He felt himself heat up, and he was ready to go off at the ice user. But he stopped himself. He stopped because he decided that it didn't matter. The green-haired boy took a deep breath before exhaling heavily. After that, he just straightened himself once more before turning to leave. Whether you use your flames or not, it doesn't matter to me. In the end, it will only amount to the same result. That is, with you losing, Izuku said, having his back turned towards his ice-cold classmate. The hallway was filled with a silence, one that usually would only be heard in the vacuum of space. No words were spoken during this time, but one thing was clear. Nothing else needed to be said. The silence was broken by the sound of faint footsteps against the ground as Izuku slowly made his way out. You know, I've thought about it for a while, a cold voice then said, prompting the green-haired boy to stop and listen. Todoroki giggled a little before he continued. For a while I wondered why you didn't try and fight me during the cavalry battle. You didn't fight anyone not until Bakugo managed to reach you, and I wondered why. But now, having thought about it for a while, I think I know the answer. You didn't want to face me. Izuku froze upon hearing this. He didn't understand his own reaction at this. It was as if Todoroki's words had struck a nerve in some way, and he didn't know how to react. Todoroki, if I was afraid of you, I wouldn't be here. The green-haired boy responded, his voice remaining calm. Todoroki just looked at him with his usual cold glare as he straightened himself while saying, That's funny. I never said that you were afraid. With his usual cold voice, Izuku just remained frozen without any form of reaction as Todoroki slowly walked up to him. Eventually, he walked past the green-haired boy. That is when he stopped to say, I know that you losing is virtually impossible, but make sure that you don't get eliminated before facing me. Before walking out of the hallway, Izuku remained in the exact same position and posture as before. He still hadn't reacted. He probably didn't hear Todoroki's last words either. He just stood there, face completely devoid of any type of emotion, as he clenched his fist with a bone-shattering grip. Some time passed and the festival was once again back in action. The third round was going to be a classic tournament fashion, with every match being drawn at random. Both Ojiro and a student from Class 1B decided to drop out, but their spots were quickly filled before the matches were officially made. Izuku's first opponent was a student from the general course called Hitoshi Shinso, and people had already decided how it was going to play out. Izuku had shown off his strength on multiple occasions, so the idea of him losing to someone like Shinso was just laughable. Alright, it's time for the first match to begin! Prism Mike announced, his voice being as loud and excited as always. The crowds cheered and bellowed in response to this, eagerly waiting for what's about to happen. Both fighters were then introduced, sending even more excitement across the stadium. This match might as well be a joke. There's no way that Midoriya will lose against that guy. Kaminari commented, almost laughing at the horrendous difference in power between the competitors. Yeah, Midoriya can end this fight with just a flick of his finger. Kurishima then added, somehow hoping for an awesome fight. A few other students joined in on this chatter about the fight, most talking about how Izuku was the stronger one. But there was one who was completely silent. It was Ojiro, and he seemed to be deep into a concerned thought. He had tried to warn Izuku about Shinso's quirk before the match, but he couldn't. The second that he tried to speak to the green-haired boy, his words got stuck in his throat, and he ended up not saying anything in the end. He was trying to figure out why this happened, but his mind could only come to one answer. One concerning answer. Is something wrong, Gojiro? A female voice then asked. The tail boy turned his expression towards the speaker, only to see that it was Uraraka. The brown-haired girl looked both confused and concerned, but Ojiro could sense the part of that concern wasn't for him. It's Midoriya. I tried to warn him about Shinso's quirk earlier. I think he can brainwash people and force them to do his bidding. But I ended up not saying anything. His eyes, when I looked into them, it felt as if I was standing in a blizzard. I was cold, but there was something else. The tail boy said, trying to figure out what the other thing was. He's angry, and I think I know why. Uraraka then said, snapping Ojiro back to attention. Everyone turned towards the brown-haired girl, all wanting to hear what she thought. She took a deep breath before she said, I think he's afraid. With a voice that showed her concern. The other students were confused, wondering where this came from. They could accept that Izuku was angry, but afraid? He might as well be the strongest person in the hero course. What does he have to be afraid of? Kaminari then asked, not believing what Uraraka had just said. The brown-haired girl didn't have an answer to this question, or she didn't know how to phrase it. She had seen Izuku's reaction after Bakugo nearly took his headband in the cavalry battle, and it made her concerned for him. In that moment, she saw something that she had never seen in Izuku's eyes before. Fear. But she didn't know why. The pressure of answering the question was relieved by Midnight, who shouted, Begin! To announce the beginning of the first match. Everyone's attention was turned to the ring and the two competitors standing in it, waiting to see what would happen. Shinso was saying many things, asking many questions, all in an attempt to make Izuku talk. The green-haired boy didn't know what Shinso's quirk was, or how it was triggered. But it didn't matter since he had no intention to speak anyway. Shinso became more desperate and started to throw nasty insults towards Izuku, with no response. The green-haired boy just stood there, eyes towards the ground, without moving an inch. No one knew what he was doing, for he wasn't even trying to fight. His opponent didn't really pose that much of a threat, but this was a match. One of them needed to be defeated for things to progress, and Izuku knew that. He clenched his fist tightly, gritting his teeth, before he began to float up in the air. Everyone saw this and started getting excited, for things were about to go down. The green-haired boy floated in the air without disruption, before he suddenly sped up and crashed into the ground with a bellow. The collision sent a web of cracks all over the concrete, and it created a massive shockwave. Shinso had lost his footing after being hit by the wave, and was sent flying out of the ring. Now everyone was shocked. As they looked at the ferocious expression of Izuku, they knew that he would end the match quickly, but they didn't think that he would cause so much destruction in the process. The green-haired boy panted heavily, calming himself down, before he looked at the now terrified Shinso and said, Sorry, I didn't mean to be so rough. I'm just in a bad mood at the moment. With a calm voice, before walking away. These words had knocked Midnight out of her frozen shock, as she announced Izuku to be the winner. The green-haired boy then turned to look at Shinso, but he still knew that he had been terrified by what he did. This was a more horrifying way of winning, but deep down Shinso knew that this would happen. He knew that he had lost upon realizing that Izuku wouldn't talk. The other matches played out in an orderly fashion, but Izuku only paid attention to a few of them. Todoroki fought against Zero, ending the fight nearly instantly by freezing nearly half the stadium. The last fight had Uraraka going up against Bakugo, but she ended up losing after a huge struggle. Now it was time for the second round, and the audience were in deep anticipation for this next bout. It was between Izuku and Todoroki, and the anticipation came from their similarities. They both ended up their first fight in an extreme and destructive way, so they couldn't wait to see what would happen. Izuku made his way through the halls, while thinking about his up-and-coming fight. He kept thinking of how it was going to play out, and what he was going to do. He knew that Todoroki was strong, but surely there was no way that he would lose against him. The green-haired boy kept contemplating while he was walking, until he was interrupted. From around the corner came a massive figure, clad in an armor of orange flames. Izuku stopped at the sight of this man. He stood right in front of him and asked, "You're Midoriya, right?" with a passive-aggressive tone, one that didn't suit a hero. Izuku looked at Endeavor, trying to keep a calm expression as he answered by saying, "Yeah?" with a calm voice. Endeavor's expression remained aggressive as he then proceeded by asking another question. "I heard that you're Omni-Man's kid, is that right?" With the same voice as before, Izuku started getting annoyed by this as he looked at Endeavor and said, "Yeah, so what?" with a voice that showed his annoyance. Endeavor seemed to be unaffected by this as he grunted and said, "Good. Your next match is against my son. Make sure he uses his flames," with a voice that sounded more demanding than before. Izuku's annoyance was raised even further upon hearing this as the hero continued. "Shoto was created to surpass All Might, but he's being stupid. He needs to wake up and realize his purpose. And what better way to do that than to fight Omni-Man's brat?" His voice sounding more and more aggressive as it was demanding. Izuku's anger skyrocketed after hearing this. Prior to this, he had recognized the similarities between him and Todoroki, but now he started to acknowledge the differences. They were both the sons of strong heroes, but there was a clear difference in their upbringing. Izuku's father was encouraging, kind, and supportive, while Endeavor was abusive and forceful. Izuku had told himself that he didn't care if Todoroki used his flames or not, but deep down he does. Deep down he wants to help Todoroki, make him realize that it's his quirk. This action would go against all logic in battle, helping your opponent, but as a hero he needed to do this. Upon making this resolution within himself, the green-haired boy took a deep breath. Then he began floating and proceeded to move past Endeavor. "Why would I help my opponent in battle?" he calmly said as he passed the hero. Endeavor didn't respond to this. He just flared up a little as he went on his way. Izuku's words did contradict his decision, but it didn't mean that he had changed his mind. He was going to make Todoroki use his flames, and he was going to win. Izuku floated his way into the arena, being met by a wave of cheers. Already waiting for him on the other side of the ring was Todoroki, looking as cold as always. Both fighters stared each other down, not moving or saying a single word as President Mike introduced them both. "How do you think this will play out?" All Might asked, while also observing what was about to happen. Nolan looked as unamused as always as he said, "Izuku will win, it's as simple as that." With a voice that reflected his expression, All Might didn't respond to this, for he had expected no less from Nolan. He just kept his eyes on the two teens, preparing himself for an incredible display of power. Todoroki kept his cold glare locked onto his green-haired opponent, deeply determined to win. His father was watching, so this was his chance. If he defeats Omni-Man's son with nothing but his ice, he will finally break free from his father's grasp. He needs this victory. Midnight shouts, prompting both teams to take action. Todoroki sent the streams of ice towards Izuku, but it was instantly destroyed by a punch. He was then sent another stream from a different angle, but it met the same fate. This exchange continued for a long while, meeting the same result over and over again. Everyone watched was stunned by the display, and they thought the teens were equally matched. Even Nolan was a little surprised, but he was also skeptical. He was sure that Izuku could have ended the match immediately if he had just flown at top speed and hit Todoroki, But that opportunity vanished the second that Todoroki had shot his ice. The unlicensed hero had a few theories to explain why Izuku didn't make the first move. His first idea was that Izuku intended to do so, but backed off when he saw the ice. This theory made more sense if Izuku was wary of the ice attack that Todoroki had used in the first round. The second theory was that Izuku didn't react fast enough and therefore was forced into defense. The third and most nonsensical option was that Izuku actively chose not to end the match in an instant. If this was the case, Nolan had no idea what his son was planning. The two teens continued to dance around each other, with Izuku being forced to keep his distance. Eventually, he managed to use his flight to get past Todoroki's ice, catching him wide open. The green-haired boy approached the bicolored teen with an intent of striking him down. But after getting close enough, he realized that it was a mistake. Todoroki had waited for this moment, and it took a lot of planning. He knew that Izuku would be wary of his previous attack, so he needed to lure him into a position where he couldn't avoid it. That is where the smaller streams were for, and they had served their purpose well. Izuku didn't have enough time to react, as he saw the ice forming around him. Before anyone even knew it, the arena was once again covered in a massive pillar of ice. Midnight was shocked, as she didn't move a muscle. Izuku was deeply embedded into the ice pillar, so there was no way that he could continue. "The match is!" she shouted, but was immediately interrupted by a loud noise. She couldn't really identify what it was, but sounded like some weird pounding. Not only that, it was coming from the ice pillar. Everyone's expression turned towards the ice, right as it was blasted to pieces. This was enough to shock all of them. But what made it even more baffling was what happened afterwards. Right as the ice broke, Todoroki was flung backwards. He quickly landed as he saw what happened. In front of him was none other than Izuku, standing where he previously had been with his left fist in the cracking concrete. Everyone was dumbfounded, for Izuku looked unharmed. He had just been completely encased in ice, and the only hint of damage on him was his frozen right arm. "This doesn't look good for you, Todoroki. You won't win as you are right now," the green-haired boy then said, tensing his right arm until the ice on it shattered. The bicolored teen went from shock to annoyance, because he knew what Izuku was implying. "Did you say that you didn't care whether I used my flames or not? And did my father talk?" Todoroki shouted, but it was interrupted by charging Izuku. The bicolored teen managed to evade, but it was still sent back by Izuku's earth-shattering stomp. "You're against your opponent that doesn't care who you are. One that could have ended this match the second that it began. Tell me, after hearing all of this, does it really matter where your power comes from?" But the green-haired boy then shouted, right before he charged in for another stomp. Todoroki was knocked back again, only this time he didn't stick the landing. "Wake up, Todoroki! It's not your father's, and it's not your mother's either. It's your own damn quirk, so use it already!" Izuku then shouted with a burning hot fury. Todoroki slowly dragged himself up to his feet as he started to have a realization. Izuku was right. It wasn't his parents' quirks. It's his quirk, and he needed to use it if he wants any chance of victory. The bicolored teen clenched his fist hard as his left side began to smoke. Eventually, a wild flame arose, melting the ice that was previously on his body. At this very moment, Nolan finally realized what Izuku was trying to do. He was sure that Todoroki also had figured it out by now, but Izuku cared. He may have said that he didn't care, but the truth was that he did. He cared so much that he went as far as to help an opponent in the middle of combat, a choice that was considered to be very foolish. The green-haired boy trembled at the sight of the flames as he stood and admired it. His trembling stopped, however, as a wide grin formed on his face. "Why are you smiling? You just helped your opponent in combat," Todoroki said, sounding like the flames were affecting his body too much. Izuku's smile didn't leave his face, as he responded by saying, "Sorry, I just can't help but smile in situations like these." with a voice that sounded more like the friendly tone that people knew him by. These words sounded like nothing but foolish blabber to Todoroki, as he grew a smile on his own before shouting, "Let's end this, Midoriya!" with a fury intent. Izuku grinned even wider as he responded with a nod. After that, Izuku took off at top speed towards Todoroki, charging up his strongest punch. The bi-colored teen responded by shooting a stream of ice before raising his flame-coated hand. The collision resulted in a massive explosion, shaking and sending cracks all over the stadium. The ring was covered in a thick cloud of smoke, so no one could see what had happened. But the dust slowly settled, revealing the results to everyone. The audience was stunned into silence, unsure of what reaction was appropriate for this result, as Midnight snapped out of it and announced, "The match is over!" Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope that you enjoyed. Before you leave, we would just like to let you know that We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below here in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's it for today's video, so goodbye, and have a divine day.